If you're ready to dive into a world of thrilling and jaw-dropping moments, then Bleeding Walls is the channel you've been waiting for. Join us for exclusive content that pushes boundaries and breaks conventions, delivering intense excitement and unforgettable experiences right to your screen. Don't miss out. Subscribe now and become part of the Bleeding Walls community where every moment counts. In the heart of an old, forgotten city stood a house many whispered about, but few dared approach. Its crumbling facade and overgrown garden told tales of neglect, but beneath the layers of dust and decay, there was a secret waiting to be uncovered. This was the story of the Bleeding Walls house, a place where legends came to life and the past refused to stay buried. It was said that the walls bled in the midnight hour, crying out stories of sorrow and rage from a century gone by. Emma had always been drawn to mysteries, her curiosity pulling her toward the unknown like a moth to a flickering flame. When she heard about Bleeding Walls on a late-night podcast, her imagination ignited. Unlike the casual listener, Emma felt compelled to understand what lay behind the stories, the whispers that brushed against the edges of reality and nightmare. Without hesitation, she booked a trip to the city, determined to see the house for herself and learn its story firsthand. Arriving at twilight, the sun dipped behind twisted silhouettes of bare trees, casting long shadows over the cracked cobblestone path. Emma paused at the edge of the garden, noting how the ivy strangled the wrought iron gate that hung from rusted hinges. She pushed it open with a creak that echoed in the stillness, as if awakening the spirits trapped inside. The air grew colder, thick with the scent of old wood, damp stone, and something else, something faintly metallic that made her skin prickle. As Emma stepped inside, the wooden floor groaned beneath her weight, and her flashlight beam danced along faded wallpaper cracked like fractured memories. She traced her fingers along the walls, imagining the hands that had once lived here, felt the pulse of history that throbbed just beyond sight. The house seemed alive, whispering secrets in a language she almost understood. She found her way to the parlor, where a grand fireplace still stood intact, its soot-stained bricks holding shadows in their embrace. Above it hung a large, cracked mirror reflecting a distorted version of the room behind her. Emma noticed the faintest streak of dark red staining the white paint around the window frame. Her heart quickened. Was it rust, old paint, or the bleeding she had heard about? Hours passed as Emma explored room after room, uncovering scraps of letters, yellowed photographs, and relics left frozen in time. She pieced together the story of a family torn apart by tragedy, a father lost to war, a mother driven to despair, and two children with futures stolen before they could bloom. Each artifact told a fragment of their pain, their hopes, and the curse that seemed to cling to the walls like a living thing. In the attic, Emma came face to face with the journal of the youngest daughter, Eliza. Her handwriting trembled across the fragile pages, chronicling days filled with fear and longing. Eliza's words revealed the moments before the house's darkest hour, when a visitor came, bringing destruction disguised as salvation. The journal ended abruptly, leaving Emma suspended between grief and anger. As midnight approached, Emma felt a chill curling down her spine. She sat by the window, the blood-red stains glaring back at her, and listened. The house began to murmur, a low hum of voices weaving into a mournful song. The walls pulsed softly beneath her fingers, warm and damp like a living wound. She realized the bleeding was not just paint or rust. It was the house itself, alive with memory, crying out for acknowledgement. Determined to honor the lives lost within these walls, Emma recorded her findings and promised to share the story beyond the decaying facade. Bleeding Walls was not just a channel or a collection of clips. It was a testament to resilience, a celebration of the human spirit that refuses to be silenced even by time. As dawn broke, Emma stepped outside, feeling the weight of history lighten like the first rays of light dispelling the darkness. The house stood silent once again, its secrets shared, its pain given voice. The bleeding walls would never stop bleeding, not as long as someone was willing to listen. In the quiet town of Ravensbrook, legend spoke of a place few dared to name: the Hollow House. It stood abandoned on the edge of the dense forest, its silhouette a jagged scar against the horizon. The townsfolk whispered of eerie lights flickering through the broken windows and strange sounds that echoed on moonless nights. To outsiders, it was a relic of neglect. To those who lived nearby, it was a realm of mysteries waiting to be unraveled. Liam, a man burdened by loss, yet driven by an insatiable curiosity, arrived in Ravensbrook seeking answers he couldn't find elsewhere. His younger sister had vanished years ago, leaving only a trail of unanswered questions. When he heard rumors about the Hollow House, its inexplicable happenings and the mysteries that clung to it like vines, he felt an unspoken pull, as if the shadows held whispers of his sister's fate. On the first day, Liam wandered through the town, piecing together fragments of stories from hesitant locales. The Hollow House had once belonged to the Whittaker family, known for their reclusive nature and strange experiments that blurred the line between science and superstition. The last Whittaker had disappeared without a trace decades ago, the house left to decay and the secrets buried with them. Undeterred by the warnings and hushed voices, Liam approached the house as twilight descended. The air thickened with anticipation, carrying the scent of moss and forgotten memories. The front porch sagged under the weight of time, and the boards creaked under his cautious steps. Yet inside, there was a strange sense of familiarity, as if the house was breathing alongside him, aware of his presence and his purpose. Room by room, Liam discovered relics of a past intertwined with both hope and dread. Letters filled with cryptic symbols, faded photographs capturing moments lost to time, and journals filled with frantic scribbles hinting at discoveries that defied reason. The deeper he delved, the heavier the atmosphere grew, pressing against his skin like an invisible force. In the study, amidst scattered papers, he found notes that spoke of a device, an invention meant to pierce the veil between worlds. The Whittakers had sought to communicate with those who had passed beyond, to reach into the unknown and bring back lost souls. Liam's heart raced as he connected the dots, imagining that his sister's disappearance might be entwined with the family's attempts to challenge mortality. Night deepened, and shadows lengthened as Liam sat in the dim glow of a dying candle. He read aloud passages from the journal, voice trembling yet resolute. The words described experiments that had spiraled beyond control, rifts opening between realities, and the consequences of meddling with forces beyond comprehension. The final entries were unfinished, abruptly cut off as if the writer had been torn away mid-thought. Suddenly, the house seemed to stir. A faint hum resonated through the walls, low and insistent. Liam's breath caught as the air shimmered, and the boundaries between past and present blurred. He saw fleeting images flicker, a girl laughing in sunlight, a shadow crossing a threshold, a door closing with finality. His sister's face appeared, ghostly and distant, yet unmistakable. A surge of hope and sorrow collided within him. Driven by an overwhelming need to understand, Liam activated the strange contraption described in the notes. The machine whirred to life, casting eerie shadows and filling the room with a pulsating light. The veil between worlds thinned, and voices whispered through the silence. Fragile, desperate calls from beyond. Liam reached out, heart pounding, seeking connection. The moment stretched, fragile and electric. Then, clarity emerged. A message from the other side. His sister, caught between worlds, trapped in a liminal space created by the failed experiments. She was waiting for someone to bring her home. With newfound resolve, Liam vowed to unravel the mysteries that had ensnared the Hollow House and to free the souls trapped within. The house no longer felt like a tomb of lost dreams. It was a beacon of hope, a bridge between worlds waiting for healing. As dawn broke over Ravensbrook, the hollow house stood silent once more, its secrets shared and its shadows less daunting. Liam stepped into the light, carrying the promise of return and redemption. The story of the bleeding walls continued, not of walls that bled sorrow, but of hearts that bled hope. The small town of Ashwood had always been a place where secrets lingered just beneath the surface, tucked away behind a veneer of quiet streets and familiar faces. Among the quiet neighborhoods stood an old estate, long abandoned and known by locals as the Crimson Manor. It was a house steeped in whispers, belonging once to a wealthy family whose sudden disappearance had left the community puzzled for decades. More than one resident had claimed to hear unexplainable noises and see strange sights there, earning the house its ominous nickname, a place where the walls themselves seemed to bleed sorrow. Sarah had recently moved to Ashwood, drawn by its tranquility and the affordable houses that dotted the leafy avenues. A writer by passion and profession, she sought inspiration in the town's intriguing history. Her curiosity piqued particularly by the stories surrounding Crimson Manor. Determined to uncover the truth behind the myths, she began her own quiet investigation, sifting through old newspaper archives, interviewing elderly townsfolk, and exploring public records in search of clues about the manor and its vanished inhabitants. What Sarah uncovered was a tapestry of tragedy and mystery. The manor had belonged to the Hargrove family, who were known for their philanthropy, but also their reclusive nature. Harold Hargrove, the patriarch, was a respected businessman until an inexplicable series of events one autumn shattered the family's fortune and reputation. One by one, family members vanished without explanation, leaving the manor empty and slowly succumbing to decay. Sarah learned that the last night the family was seen alive coincided with a fierce thunderstorm that unleashed torrents of rain. Neighbors recalled an eerie crimson glow emanating from the manor's windows, as if the house had caught fire or been bathed in blood. The following morning, the estate was silent, doors unlocked but void of life. Since then, strange happenings were reported. Faint, sobbing sounds, fleeting shadows, and inexplicably red stains appearing on the interior stonework and wallpaper. Determined to document everything, Sarah arranged permission to visit the manor legally, hoping to gather material for her next book. On her first visit, the atmosphere inside the house was thick with a heavy stillness, like a room holding its breath after a scream. The air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of moldy wood and something metallic, faintly sweet and disturbing. She found herself drawn to a large stained-glass window in the main hall, its shards fractured and recoiling in deep scarlet hues. As she explored, Sarah discovered old journals tucked behind loose bricks in the cellar belonging to Elizabeth Hargrove, the youngest daughter. The entries were desperate and fragmented, revealing a family torn apart by fear and paranoia. Elizabeth wrote about shadows moving in the corners of the room and voices whispering threats in the dead of night. Her last note suggested someone, or something, was emerging from the walls themselves, bleeding into their lives in ways that no one could escape. One night, as Sarah pored over the journals by candlelight, the quiet house suddenly came alive with unsettling sounds. The faintest trickle turned into soft dripping, then spreading into a steady flow. She rose cautiously and followed the noise, heart pounding, to the great dining room. There, the faded wallpaper had darkened in places as if veins of thick red liquid were oozing down the walls, pulsing slowly and rhythmically like a heartbeat. She ran her fingers over the damp stains and felt the chilling truth. The manor was weeping blood. Not metaphorically, but quite literally, bleeding its anguish onto the floors and furniture. Overwhelmed but determined, Sarah began recording the phenomenon, capturing images and notes, vowing to expose the house's dark reality. Days turned into weeks, and the bleeding intensified in both volume and frequency. Each night, the crimson tears seeped through cracks and crevices, saturating the cold stone beneath. Sarah's nights were plagued by vivid dreams of the Hargrove family, trapped in a liminal space between life and death, their pain embodied in the bleeding walls. The house whispered secrets only she could hear, tales of betrayal, loss, and vengeance that had poisoned the family's soul and stained the manor indelibly. Driven by a mix of dread and empathy, Sarah researched local archives for tragedies tied to the Hargroves and found evidence of a bitter feud that culminated in a deadly confrontation within the manor. The family's patriarch, it seemed, had made a deal steeped in darkness that backfired horribly. The manor itself became a vessel for unresolved grief, bleeding for the sins committed within. One evening, as thunder rolled and lightning cracked across the dark sky, Sarah stood amidst the crimson cascade and read aloud the names and stories of the lost Hargrove family members. The house responded. The walls pulsed, the blood steading thickened, and for a moment the shadows retreated. It was as if acknowledgement and remembrance offered a fragile balm to the tortured spirits bound by unspoken curses. Sarah realized then that the bleeding of the walls was not merely a paranormal phenomenon, but a call to remember, a desperate cry for justice, truth, and peace. The manor was both a tomb and a testament, a physical manifestation of grief refusing to be disguised or ignored. Her book, she decided, would be more than a horror story. It would be a tribute, a haunting memoir etched in the very blood of the forgotten. Months later, Sarah left Ashwood, her task complete, but the memory of Crimson Manor remained etched in her soul. The house, now silent but forever changed, awaited its next visitor, its bleeding walls a timeless reminder that some places bleed stories, just as some stories bleed into our very being. In the forgotten outskirts of a small town stood a house that seemed to defy time itself. Known among locals as the Sanguine Hollow, it was a place wrapped in an unsettling silence, and a legend that chilled the bones of anyone who dared speak of it. The stories told of walls that wept blood, and nights when desperate whispers seeped through the cracks. Yet behind the veil of fear, the house held a tragic history, waiting for someone to listen. Jared, a seasoned paranormal investigator tired of the predictable, found himself drawn to Sanguine Hollow by a faint thread of hope mixed with an unrelenting compulsion. Letters had been sent to him by a woman named Evelyn, the granddaughter of the house's last occupants, pleading for answers after years of torment and a disappearance no one could explain. Upon arrival, Jared felt the weight of the air pressing against his skin like a tangible sorrow. The house, though dilapidated and cloaked in ivy, radiated a strange warmth, an echo of life buried and torn apart. His first few steps inside were met by an oppressive quiet, broken only by the distant dripping of what sounded like water, but as he looked closer, he saw it was something else. Faint crimson streaks tracing the wallpaper, as though the walls themselves had been crying. Evelyn's story unfolded with every revealing corner Jared explored. Years ago, her family had moved into the house seeking refuge from a sorrow that followed them like a shadow. Her great-grandfather, a reputed scholar in ancient law, had brought with him a sealed tome, the Necronomicon of Forgotten Bloodlines, a book whispered about in occult circles for its cursed knowledge. The family's fortunes had quickly faded, replaced by a mounting despair and strange phenomena that escalated into terror. The book, it seemed, had opened a doorway to a restless force that fed on grief and guilt, twisting the house into a vessel of anguish. The bleeding walls were no mere hallucination or legend. They were a manifestation of the curse, the house leaking the torment of its inhabitants' souls. Jared spent sleepless nights reading Evelyn's journals, each entry a desperate plea for salvation and a chronicle of the creeping dread. The bleeding became more vivid in his records. Thick beads of scarlet oozing from cracks and pooling on ancient wooden floors, filling rooms with a metallic scent so strong it made his head swim. Shadows moved at the edge of his vision, hard to catch but impossible to ignore. At the stroke of midnight, the house seemed to breathe with him, growing alive in a way that defied explanation. A voice, whispering half-words and broken names, beckoned from beneath the floorboards. Jared's hands trembled as he uncovered the cellar hatch, long hidden beneath a moth-eaten rug. Descending into the darkness, he found relics intertwined with dried blood. Symbols etched into the stone walls pulsed faintly with a crimson glow. It was there that he uncovered the final secret. A broken mirror face down on the floor, its silver backing weeping thick red droplets. The mirror was said to hold the passage to the other side, a portal made unstable by the cursed tomes and the family's pain. Evelyn's great-grandfather had hoped to harness its power, but all he unleashed was destruction. Jared's resolve hardened. He began a ritual of cleansing, following the ancient rites Evelyn's family had attempted, but failed. With each incantation, the bleeding slowed. The house's cries softened. For a moment, the dense sadness lifted, replaced by a fragile peace born of acknowledgement and release. As dawn painted pale light across the horizon, Jared left Sanguine Hollow forever changed. His recordings, tapes, and Evelyn's journals promised that the story of the bleeding walls would no longer be whispered in fear, but told with reverence. A reminder that pain, no matter how deep, can be faced, and that even places steeped in darkness hold the hope of healing. In the outskirts of a quiet suburban neighborhood lay a house known by locals as the Crimson Refuge. Its unassuming exterior belied a sinister history, whispered of in hushed tones among those who lived nearby. The house had gained a notorious reputation not just for eerie sounds and restless spirits, but because its walls were said to bleed, literally exuding deep red stains that no one could explain. Many dismissed the tales as folklore, but those who dared step inside spoke of a darkness that felt alive, a sorrow that clung to every corner. Maya was a documentary filmmaker drawn to the paranormal by a desire to uncover truths hidden behind the veil of superstition. When she came across the story of the Crimson Refuge, she felt an irresistible pull to investigate. The accounts of bleeding walls, tragic family secrets, and unexplained phenomena intrigued her, promising material far deeper than standard ghost stories. Maya's intent was not only to capture the supernatural, but to understand the pain encoded within the house's very foundation. Upon arrival, Maya was met with a stillness that felt almost unnatural. The neighborhood was otherwise peaceful, but the air around the house was heavy, thick with the weight of unspoken history. She had been told the house had been abandoned for years, save for occasional visits from those hoping to uncover the truth. The previous occupants, the Davenport family, had vanished without explanation decades ago, leaving behind only fragments of a life interrupted. Maya's first step inside the house was like crossing a threshold, not just of space, but of time. The air was cool and stale, imbued with the scent of damp wood and faint metallic undertones that hinted at the unexplained. Her flashlight revealed peeling wallpaper stained with irregular crimson streaks that seemed to shift in the flickering light. The bleeding was not a recent occurrence. It had seeped into the very fabric of the home, staining the plaster and the ancient wooden beams. As she began her investigation, Maya uncovered snippets of the Davenport family's history through forgotten journals, scattered photographs, and worn newspaper clippings. The family patriarch, Thomas Davenport, had once been a respected figure in the town, known for his charitable work and dedication to his kin. Yet behind the public esteem was a story of sorrow and wounded pride. Thomas's wife, Eleanor, had suffered from a mysterious illness that confounded doctors, gradually isolating her from the world. The final days of the Davenports were shrouded in tragedy. According to local legend, Eleanor's despair grew unbearable as her condition worsened and dark whispers filled the house. The bleeding walls were said to have begun at this time, as if Eleanor's torment spilled forth in a physical manifestation. The blood-like stains appeared not just in the places she frequented, but spread like veins throughout the entire structure, pulsing with the family's grief. Maya explored every room, documenting each crimson mark with a meticulous eye. The living room walls bore handprints pressed deep into the faded plaster, surrounded by weeping stains that shimmered faintly in the light. In what appeared to be the children's bedroom, a pool of thick red liquid had congealed near the old wooden floorboards. Maya hesitated before touching it, but her scientific curiosity overcame her fear. Samples later tested in the lab revealed an unsettling truth. The substance was human blood. The more Maya learned, the more the house seemed to react to her presence. At night, the air grew colder, filled with soft murmurs and distant footsteps echoing through empty halls. Shadows danced just beyond her vision, and in her dreams, she was visited by fleeting images of Eleanor, pale and sorrowful, reaching out but fading before she could be grasped. Determined to understand the origins of the bleeding, Maya dug into the darker corners of the town's history. She discovered that before the Davenports, the land had been the site of a religious cult that practiced forbidden rites aimed at binding spirits to the physical world. The cult was rumored to have engaged in blood sacrifices, believing that offering blood to the earth would grant them protection and power. The house, built decades later, sat atop the remnants of their rituals, its foundations soaked in ancient grief and violence. Maya found writings that suggested the Davenport family had unknowingly disturbed this restless energy, awakening a force that demanded tribute in kind. Eleanor's illness was not merely a disease but a manifestation of this supernatural curse, feeding off her suffering as a conduit. The bleeding walls were a cry of pain, a place where past darkness and present anguish intertwined, refusing to be silenced. One night, as she recorded her findings, Maya witnessed the house bleed anew. From cracks in the plaster, rivulets of scarlet oozed and pooled, glowing faintly with an unnatural light. The sound was soft but unmistakable, like the steady heartbeat of the house itself, alive and wounded. The moment was both terrifying and sorrowful, a haunting testament to the deep scars invisible to the eye. Using rituals uncovered in the cult's writings, combined with Eleanor's own desperate journal entries pleading for release, Maya performed a ceremony to cleanse the house's spirit. The ritual was arduous, filled with chants and the use of sacred symbols long forgotten. As dawn approached, the bleeding slowed, the walls quieted, and a fragile peace settled over the home as if it had been heard and accepted. Maya's experience at the Crimson Refuge became more than a documentary project. It was a journey into the resilience of suffering and the persistence of memory. The bleeding walls told a story far beyond horror. They were a symbol of pain transformed into catharsis, a reminder that even the darkest wounds can find light, with understanding and compassion. She left the house changed, carrying its story to the world with a solemn reverence. The Crimson Refuge no longer haunted her as a place of fear, but as a monument to grief's endurance and the possibility of healing. And though the walls had stopped bleeding outwardly, Maya knew they would forever carry the stains of sorrow and hope intertwined. In the quiet, suburban sprawl of Miller's Field, there stood a house unlike any other, whispered about by locals as the Scarlet Hollow. It was a home with a dark reputation, one that transcended simple ghost stories to encompass something more visceral and unnerving. The inhabitants spoke in hushed tones of how the walls bled, not figuratively, but literally, as if the very essence of the house was seeping sorrow and rage into the air. The story of Scarlet Hollow had woven itself into the fabric of the town's lore, a chilling reminder that some places carry pain so deep it stains not just memories but bricks and mortar. Ella, a professional investigator of the paranormal and psychological mysteries, was intrigued by the tales of Scarlet Hollow. She had spent years exploring haunted locations, peeling back layers of history and human emotion that often clung to places like a second skin. When she first heard about this house, she was skeptical, but curiosity pulled her inexorably toward the enigma, driven by a desire to understand what could cause walls to bleed. Upon entering the house for the first time, Ella felt the air thicken immediately. The scent of iron was unmistakable, mingling with the mustiness of an old home. Her flashlight scanned the interior, revealing walls that bore irregular streaks of deep red. The stains did not behave like paint or rust. They shifted subtly, glistening as if fresh and yet stubbornly refusing to run away or dry. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, a heartbeat trapped within plaster and stone. As Ella delved into the history of the house, she uncovered a tale of tragedy and vengeance stretching back nearly a century. The original owners, the Merriweather family, were prosperous but deeply fractured. Thomas Merriweather, a man of stern disposition and secretive nature, had been the head of a regional steel factory. Behind the veneer of success, dark dealings and violent disputes simmered beneath the surface, often fueled by greed, jealousy, and betrayal. The family's fall from grace was swift and brutal. Thomas's wife, Agnes, had died under mysterious circumstances. Her death officially ruled an accident, but local gossip hinted at something far more sinister, a murder concealed by power and influence. Her blood, it was rumored, had seeped into the very walls of their home, staining them with a supernatural malice that no amount of time could erase. Ella discovered diaries written by Agnes's closest confidant, revealing a life shadowed by fear and secrets. Agnes had been desperate to escape the grip of a cruel and jealous husband, and her last entries spoke of encountering dark forces that whispered promises of vengeance beyond the grave. The blood on the walls, the diary suggested, was not just a mark of death, but a curse fueled by the unrelenting sorrow and rage of a betrayed soul. The most recent residents of Scarlet Hollow added a new chapter to this haunting narrative. A young couple, the Reynolds, had moved in hoping for a fresh start, only to be driven away by nightmares and inexplicable horrors. They reported finding the red stains pulsing and spreading, the walls weeping blood in the dead of night. The stains would appear suddenly and vanish just as quickly, as if alive and aware. Ella's nights were restless as the house unveiled its secrets. She documented instances of the bleeding, capturing photos and samples of the strange liquid. Laboratory analysis confirmed the substance was indeed human blood, an unsettling truth that challenged her scientific skepticism. The blood did not belong to anyone in the house, nor did its DNA match any known relatives of the Merriweathers. One evening, as a storm raged outside, Ella experienced something that would forever change her understanding of the house. Sitting in the dim light of the parlor, she felt the temperature drop sharply. Then, the walls began to bleed more profusely, sheets of crimson oozing down like living veins. From within that pulsating mass came whispering voices, soft and mournful, interwoven with a cry of rage and pain, a desperate plea for justice. Drawn by a force she could not resist, Ella followed the voices to the basement. There, hidden beneath loose floorboards, she uncovered an old iron chest. Inside lay letters, faded photographs, and a bundle of aged cloth stained dark with what she knew could only be blood. The letters revealed a conspiracy involving Thomas Merriweather's business rivals and implicated men who had wanted to destroy the family through any means necessary, including murder and black magic. Ella realized the spirits trapped in Scarlet Hollow were bound not only by death but by betrayal and a thirst for truth. She resolved to perform a rite of release, combining practices from folklore and psychology, aiming to break the cycle of pain that kept the house bleeding. The ritual, conducted under the glow of a waning moon, was both harrowing and cleansing. As Ella intoned chants and offered symbolic gestures of forgiveness and truth, the walls responded. The bleeding slowed to a gentle trickle, and the voices quieted to peaceful sighs. For the first time in decades, Scarlet Hollow seemed to breathe freely, its walls mending themselves, but not erasing the memory embedded within. Ella left the house at dawn, her body weary, but her spirit uplifted. She carried with her the story of a house that bled not just blood, but the weight of human suffering and betrayal. Scarlet Hollow was a place where pain had become physical, and where healing required courage, compassion, and the will to unearth buried truths. Her investigation became the foundation for her most profound work yet, a testament to the endurance of memory and the mysterious ways in which the past imprints itself on our world. The bleeding walls of Scarlet Hollow ceased their flow, but the story lived on, whispered through the very cracks of its once suffering heart. Nestled on the edge of a forgotten town was a house known simply as the Bloodstone Manor. Unlike other haunted places, its reputation was steeped not only in ghost stories, but in an eerie phenomenon few dared to describe. The walls themselves seemed to bleed, leaking crimson stains that refused to fade. Locals avoided the manor, believing it cursed, a vessel for long-buried secrets and restless spirits. Aidan, a historian with a fascination for the macabre, was drawn to Bloodstone Manor by the lure of uncovering a story lost to time. For years, whispers had circulated about the manor's grim past and its inexplicable blood-like stains. Unlike typical hauntings, this place radiated an ancient sorrow, as if the very stones mourned a tragedy too vast for memory alone. Aidan's quest was to uncover the truth behind the bleeding walls and to document the untold history they concealed. Arriving at the manor, Aidan was immediately struck by the oppressive silence that enveloped it, broken only by the crunch of dead leaves beneath his boots. The grand structure loomed, its stone walls worn by centuries yet unyielding, its windows like hollow eyes staring into oblivion. Despite the cold autumn air, the manor exuded a heavy warmth, an unseen presence waiting to be acknowledged. Inside, the air was thick with the metallic scent of iron and something indefinably ancient. Aidan's flashlight revealed streaks of dark red fluid tracing the walls, pooling in corners and soaking into the cracked floorboards. The stains pulsated softly, like dried blood attempting to reclaim its life. Fascinated and unsettled, Aidan touched the walls lightly and felt an almost imperceptible vibration, a heartbeat locked within the stone. Digging through archives and old town records, Aidan uncovered the story of the Bloodstone family, the manor's original owners. Once esteemed and wealthy, the family had risen through means clouded in rumor. Whispers of blood rites and forbidden pacts persisted long after their fall. The patriarch, Edmund Bloodstone, was a man obsessed with legacy and power, whose ruthless ambitions led to deeds shrouded in shadow. His wife, Lenora, was a gentle soul caught in a maelstrom of familial cruelty and dark secrets. The downfall of the Bloodstone family came swiftly. Tragedy struck when Lenora's 2 children disappeared one stormy night, leaving the manor plunged into silence. The patriarch's grief spiraled into madness, and before long, the house was abandoned, its inhabitants scattered or lost to time. Locals swore the manor's walls began weeping from that night onward, the bleeding walls a symbol of the family's shattered bloodline and the curse born of their sins. Aidan found letters hidden in a concealed compartment of an ancient desk, correspondence between Lenora and a mysterious confidant, revealing a desperate attempt to break free from Edmund's tyranny. Lenora's writing spoke of rituals to cleanse the family's curse and to protect the missing children. But the final letter ended abruptly, stained with a deep red blotch that looked disturbingly fresh. Night fell, and Aidan remained inside the manor, unable to tear himself away. The bleeding increased as darkness deepened, the crimson streams flowing with a strange life of their own. The manor seemed to breathe with him, walls contracting and expanding as if alive. Whispers began to fill the air, faint voices calling out names that echoed through the empty halls. Among them, the names of the lost children, Emily and Thomas, rang clear and heart-wrenching. Determined to uncover the source of the haunting, Aidan followed the voices to a hidden passage concealed behind an old tapestry. The narrow corridor descended beneath the manor, leading to a crypt sealed with intricate runes and heavy stones. Within, Aidan found relics of tragic devotion. The children's toys coated in dust, worn portraits marked by time, and a chalice stained with the same deep red as the walls. A worn journal lay beside the chalice, penned in Lenora's delicate hand. The entries revealed a tale of love and desperation. The mother's attempt to shield her children from a dark fate by performing an ancient blood ritual. The ritual aimed to trap the family's curse within the manor's walls, a sacrifice to protect their souls beyond death. But the ritual had bound the family's pain to the house itself, forever sealing their legacy in a cycle of suffering. Aidan realized then that the bleeding walls were not only a manifestation of pain, but a mute plea for release. The house was alive with the memories of the bloodstones, bleeding their sorrow into the world in hopes of being heard. With reverence, he began documenting everything, recording the phenomena while reading aloud passages from Lenora's journal to give voice to the silent anguish trapped within. At the stroke of midnight, the manor transformed. The crimson stains pulsed brighter, and shadows coalesced into fleeting shapes, the children's laughter mingling with a mother's lament. Aidan felt a warmth amidst the cold dread, a fragile moment of connection between past and present. The house seemed to acknowledge his presence, offering a glimpse of forgiveness and hope. Harnessing ancient rites from Lenora's writings, Aidan conducted a cleansing ceremony, invoking light to break the curse and ease the bleeding. The process was exhausting, fraught with moments of overwhelming sorrow and fleeting warmth. Slowly, the bleeding ceased, the walls growing still for the first time in centuries. The manor exhaled a sigh of relief, its burden lifted though its scars remained. As dawn broke over the horizon, Aidan stepped outside, carrying with him the story of Bloodstone Manor, a tale of love, loss, and the enduring power of memory. The bleeding walls had finally bled out their anguish, leaving behind not abandonment, but a solemn peace. The manor stood quiet. No longer a prison for pain, but a monument to resilience and the delicate balance between despair and healing. On the fringes of an aging town stood a residence steeped in sorrow and legend, the Blackthorn Estate. The locals whispered its name with caution, for it was said the walls did more than just witness history. They bled it. Stories circulated of crimson stains rising and falling with the tides of misfortune, seeping like wounds that refused to heal. The estate had long been sealed off, left to the ravages of time and silence, but its tale was far from forgotten. Mira, a chronicler of forgotten histories and haunted places, felt an inexplicable pull toward Blackthorn. Unlike the typical thrill-seeker, her interest was rooted deeply in uncovering the intertwined emotions lodged within haunted walls. The grief, rage, and hope no one dared speak aloud. She had read fragments of the estate's story in tattered journals and old court documents, piecing together the threads of a family tragedy that had shaped not only the estate, but the community surrounding it. The Blackthorn family had once been pillars of the town, wealthy, influential, and revered. Yet beneath the polished surface lay fractures born of ambition, jealousy, and secrets best left buried. Samuel Blackthorn, the family patriarch, was a man both admired and feared, whose stern hand ruled the estate but failed to hold together the delicate bonds of his kin. His wife, Elara, was a shadowed figure, beautiful yet distant, haunted by a past that never quite released her. Mira's research revealed a chain of events culminating in a devastating fire that razed part of the estate and claimed the lives of 2 children. The official cause, a faulty stove, never sat well with the townsfolk, who whispered of darker forces at play, a malevolent curse, or perhaps the consequences of sins too profound to be forgiven. After the tragedy, the estate became a place of mourning and fear. The surviving family members vanished one by one, leaving the house abandoned, but the bleeding continued. The walls of Blackthorn Estate were said to bleed not only after the fire, but in moments of profound intensity, times when memories swelled too large to be contained by stone and mortar. Visitors who dared approach the ruins reported spots of vivid red creeping across cracked plaster and jagged wooden beams. The stains pulsed faintly, as if alive, and an overwhelming sense of sadness hung thick in the air. Upon her arrival, Mira was met with a heavy stillness that seemed to press against her chest. The estate welcomed her with a strange mixture of chill and warmth, as if sensing her intent. Inside, the bleeding was unmistakable, dark rivulets tracing grotesque veins along the walls, pooling silently on the worn floorboards. The metallic scent of iron was pervasive, mingling with the smell of damp earth and smoke long extinguished. As Mira documented her observations, she uncovered a trove of personal letters hidden within a protected alcove, a secret cache left behind by Ilara herself. The letters painted a portrait of a woman caught in the maelstrom of family loyalty and forbidden desires. Ilara wrote of visions and voices, of shadows that moved in the corners of her eyes, and a dreadful feeling that the fire was not an accident, but a punishment inflicted by unseen hands. Her words revealed a desperate attempt to save her family through an ancient rite, one whispered about among secret societies and occult circles. The ritual demanded a sacrifice. Blood offered not to gods, but to memory itself, binding pain and loss within the very fabric of the home. Ilara's final letter was a plea for mercy, left unfinished and stained with a deep red blotch. As night deepened, Mira experienced the estate's presence in full force. The walls seemed to breathe and throb, the bleeding intensifying with shadows lengthening. Echoes of muted cries and faint laughter filled the rooms, recalling the presence of the lost children. Mira felt the weight of their absence and the continued torment bound to the estate's marrow. Drawn to an underground chamber revealed by her meticulous explorations, Mira entered a cold, dim space where remnants of ceremonial tools lay scattered. Candles blackened by smoke, bowls etched with cryptic symbols, and dried petals stained with crimson residue. The chamber felt like a grave of hopes and regrets, a place where past and present coalesced. In that sacred, haunted space, Mira began to recite Ilara's words aloud, hoping to give voice to the silenced and to decode the secrets trapped between the bleeding walls. The estate seemed to respond, the bleeding slowing to a soft pulse, as if acknowledging the attempt to heal old wounds. With a solemn heart, Mira performed a ritual of release, honoring both the living and the dead. She invoked forgiveness and remembrance, inviting the restless spirits to find peace and the estate's walls to cease their bleeding. The process was taxing, emotional, and fraught with moments of vivid visions, a mother's embrace, children's laughter fading into light, and a house finally exhaling its grief. When dawn painted the sky in shades of rose and gold, the Blackthorn Estate stood still but alive with a new silence, not one of abandonment, but of renewal. Mira departed carrying the story of a place that bled history and sorrow, but found, through remembrance and courage, a path toward healing. The bleeding walls would remain a testament, not of despair, but of the profound capacity for redemption engraved in every scar. In the sleepy town of Eastbrook stood the Crown Ridge House, a place long whispered about but rarely spoken aloud. The origin of its eerie nickname lay in the inexplicable phenomenon reported by those who crossed its threshold. The walls of the house would bleed. Not figuratively, but with real crimson blood seeping slowly from the cracks and crevices, as if the home itself was wounded and weeping. The townsfolk shunned the house, and those who lived there rarely stayed long. Julian, a historian turned paranormal researcher, was fascinated by the tales. For years, he had collected stories of haunted places, but none so haunting nor so visceral as Crown Ridge. Unlike typical ghost stories, the bleeding walls carried a weight of sorrow and untold anguish, a story that seemed etched directly into the fabric of the house. Julian's quest was to uncover the legacy behind the bleeding walls and bring the forgotten truth into the light. Upon entering Crown Ridge House, Julian was immediately struck by an overwhelming stillness, a silence that seemed almost alive. The air was thick and cool, heavy with the faint scent of iron and damp earth. As his flashlight swept across the walls, the crimson fluid glistened disturbingly. Streaks and droplets oozed slowly, gathering into pools on the aged hardwood floors. The blood was fresh despite the house's age, and it moved subtly, almost as if it breathed. The history Julian unearthed was steeped in tragedy. The house had once been the lavish estate of the Carlton family, once wealthy and respected, but fractured by secrets and sorrow. Edward Carlton, the stern patriarch, was a man desperate to protect his legacy, yet blind to the fractures growing within his family. His wife, Margaret, was a gentle soul crushed by years of silent suffering, and their children bore the weight of secrets better left buried. Julian's research revealed a devastating chapter. Years before Edward's impending death, Margaret had disappeared without a trace. Neighbors reported hearing muffled cries on stormy nights and witnessed shadows flitting behind the drawn curtains. The day Margaret vanished, a fierce thunderstorm ravaged the town, and the skies bled red with lightning, their home forever scarred by that ominous night. When Edward passed away under mysterious circumstances shortly after, the house fell into neglect, abandoned and left to decay. But the bleeding began soon after, creeping steadily through the walls and floors, spreading like a wound that refused to heal. Julian discovered old letters hidden in the attic, written by Margaret, chronicling despair and a desperate plea for salvation. She described a shadow that followed her, a darkness born within the walls themselves, an ancient curse tied to the family's bloodline. More troubling was the discovery of a sealed journal belonging to Edward, locked away in a secret compartment behind the fireplace. Inside, Edward confessed to a dark pact he made to protect his family's fortune, an unholy agreement that demanded a price in blood and soul. The blood bleeding from the walls, he believed, was the price the house collected with each passing year, a manifestation of guilt and broken promises. As Julian set up his equipment for a long night of investigation, he felt the house's mood grow heavy with anticipation. The bleeding intensified with shadows twitching at the edges of his vision. Whispered voices echoed faintly through the halls, weaving through the damp air like mournful prayers. Julian caught fleeting glimpses of figures cloaked in crimson, their faces blurred but filled with sorrow and accusation. At the stroke of midnight, the house seemed to breathe as if alive. The walls pulsed rhythmically, dripping blood in a slow, agonizing heartbeat. Julian carefully read passages from Margaret's letters aloud, hoping to ease the spirit's suffering. The air shifted, and the shadows coalesced into clear forms, a mother seeking forgiveness, a father tormented by his deeds, and children trapped between worlds. A sudden chill swept the room as Julian discovered a hidden trap-door beneath the floorboards. Unlocking it, he descended into a small, shadowed chamber smeared with dried blood. The room was filled with relics of dark rituals, candles blackened by past flames, runes etched in ancient languages, and a blood-stained dagger laid carefully on a stone altar. This chamber was the heart of the house's curse, a site of sacrifice and suffering. Julian performed a ritual of release, guided by fragments from Margaret's letters and age-old incantations designed to break curses born of blood and sorrow. As he intoned the final words, the bleeding slowed to a gentle trickle, and then ceased. The oppressive weight in the air lifted like a heavy fog dissipating at dawn. The house exhaled a long, shuddering breath, a moment of peace at last. With the rising sun filtering through cracked windows, Julian stepped outside, the story of the bleeding walls no longer a mystery, but a testament to the power of memory and forgiveness. The Crown Ridge house stood silent, no longer a prison of blood and shadows, but a monument to healing and the redemptive strength of facing the past.